For more than a century, the Langley family had lived in secrecy, their true legacy hidden behind a facade of wealth and respectability. While the world saw them as a family of old-money aristocrats, the truth was far more sinister. The Langleys were assassins, a dynasty of killers whose services were sought by the most powerful and dangerous figures in the world. The family's legacy began in the late 19th century with Jonathan Langley, a man whose skill with a blade and stealth in the shadows earned him a fearsome reputation. Over the years, the Langley name became synonymous with death delivered silently, efficiently, and without trace. Each generation of Langleys was trained in the deadly arts from childhood, ensuring the survival of their bloodline's secret trade. In the present day, William Langley, the family patriarch, stood as the guardian of that legacy. Now in his 60s, William had retired from active work, but his influence remained strong. He had raised his sons, Robert and Marcus, to carry on the family tradition, molding them into elite assassins from a young age. Each brother had honed their own unique skills, making them a formidable pair. A legacy of shadows. The Langley estate was more than just a home. It was a fortress. Hidden beneath the grand mansion were expansive underground chambers, each designed to train the next generation in the art of assassination. From combat rooms to shooting ranges and escape tunnels, every corner of the estate served a purpose. William's training methods were rigorous. He believed that only through relentless discipline and constant vigilance could they survive in a world that had grown increasingly dangerous. As children, Robert and Marcus were taught to read people like books, anticipate threats before they emerged, and strike with precision. Robert, the elder of the two, excelled in strategy and planning. He was methodical, analytical, and patient. His calm demeanor masked a mind that could outthink even the most cunning adversaries. Marcus, by contrast, was impulsive and daring. He possessed an instinct for danger, a flair for improvisation, and unmatched marksmanship skills. Despite their differences, the brothers shared an unbreakable bond, forged through years of shared trials. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Robert's rigid adherence to plans often clashed with Marcus's penchant for risk-taking. Their differing approaches to missions occasionally caused friction, but they always found a way to work together. They had to. The survival of their family depended on it. The call to action. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, casting long shadows across the grounds, William summoned his sons to the underground war room. The chamber was dimly lit, its walls lined with weapons and surveillance equipment. On the central table lay a dossier, thick with documents and photographs. "This mission is unlike any we've faced before," William said, his voice steady but grave. "Our client is offering a fortune, but the risks are high." He opened the dossier, revealing a photo of a man in his late 40s, with sharp features and cold eyes. "Viktor Krasnov," William continued, "an ex-military strategist turned arms dealer. He's been supplying weapons to rogue states and criminal syndicates for years. He's smart, paranoid, and ruthless." Robert studied the dossier intently. "What's the objective?" "Krasnov's network has become too powerful," William replied. "Our client wants him taken down, alive, if possible, dead, if necessary. But there's more. Krasnov recently acquired sensitive information about several governments. If that information gets out, it could trigger a geopolitical crisis." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "Sounds like a challenge." William's expression remained stern. "It is. Krasnov knows we're coming. He's fortified his compound, surrounded himself with elite guards, and installed state-of-the-art security systems. He's expecting an attack." Robert nodded slowly. "We'll need to gather intelligence, Find a weakness. Precisely, William said. This isn't a mission you can rush. Take your time, plan carefully, and strike only when the odds are in your favor. The brothers exchanged a glance, the familiar thrill of the hunt stirring within them. Despite the dangers, they knew they couldn't back down. This was their legacy, their purpose. Into the lion's den over the next few weeks, Robert and Marcus meticulously prepared for the mission. Robert gathered intelligence, mapping out Krasnov's compound and identifying potential entry points. He analyzed guard patrols, security systems, and possible escape routes. Meanwhile, Marcus trained relentlessly, perfecting his marksmanship and honing his combat skills. Their plan was simple, but dangerous. Infiltrate the compound under the cover of night, disable the security systems, and capture Krasnov before he could escape. It required perfect coordination and split-second timing. Finally, the night of the mission arrived. Dressed in black tactical gear, the brothers approached the compound, their movements silent and precise. The air was tense, every shadow a potential threat. "Remember," Robert whispered through their comms, "we stick to the plan." "Got it," Marcus replied, his voice calm but tinged with excitement. They scaled the outer wall, avoiding the cameras and motion sensors. Once inside, they moved swiftly, disabling guards with silent takedowns. Everything was going according to plan until they reached the inner courtyard. Suddenly, floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the entire area. Alarms blared, and guards swarmed toward them, weapons raised. "We've been compromised," Robert said, drawing his pistol. "Time to improvise," Marcus muttered, raising his rifle. The brothers fought fiercely, their training and experience keeping them alive. But as the gunfire intensified, it became clear that Krasnov had been expecting them. They were outnumbered and outgunned. "Fall back," Robert shouted, covering Marcus as they retreated toward an exit. But before they could escape, a blast rocked the compound, throwing them to the ground. Dazed and disoriented, they struggled to their feet, only to find themselves surrounded by Krasnov's men. "Well, well," a voice said, cold and mocking. Krasnov stepped forward, flanked by armed guards. "The infamous Langley brothers. I must admit, I'm impressed you made it this far. But this is where your story ends." Robert and Marcus exchanged a tense glance. They were trapped, but they weren't about to give up without a fight. The Langley brothers stood motionless, surrounded by a dozen armed guards. Despite the hopeless situation, their expressions remained calm, their assassin instincts assessing every possible escape route. The compound's floodlights cast long shadows across the courtyard, making the scene feel more like a staged execution than a capture. "I must say, I admire your family's reputation," Krasnov said, his voice as cold as the steel of the rifles aimed at them. "But even legends fall." Robert didn't respond. He was already processing Krasnov's words, noting the arrogance in his tone. Overconfidence was a flaw he could exploit. Marcus, however, couldn't resist a jab. "For someone expecting us, you sure put on a poor welcome. We had to take out half your guards just to get here." Krasnov's eyes narrowed, but he smirked. "You're bold, I'll give you that. But boldness won't save you now." Before Krasnov could give the order to execute them, a sudden explosion rocked the eastern perimeter of the compound. The shockwave knocked several guards off their feet, and chaos erupted as alarms blared louder than ever. The guards turned their attention toward the source of the blast, momentarily distracted. "That's our cue," Marcus muttered. With lightning speed, Robert and Marcus sprang into action. Marcus grabbed the rifle from the nearest guard and took down two more before they could react. Robert moved like a shadow, disarming another guard and using him as a shield. "Head for the east exit," Robert shouted, covering Marcus as they made their way through the confusion. Krasnov cursed under his breath, barking orders to his remaining men. "Don't let them escape. Seal the compound." A narrow escape. The brothers moved through the compound with precision, their years of training guiding them through the chaos. They dodged gunfire, disabled security barriers, and neutralized anyone who got in their way. As they neared the eastern exit, Robert noticed something peculiar. There were fewer guards than he had anticipated. "This feels too easy," Robert said, his voice tense over the comms. Marcus, still riding the adrenaline high, grinned. "Maybe they're scared of us." "No," Robert said, his eyes narrowing. "It's a trap." The words had barely left his mouth when a second explosion detonated nearby, this time much closer. The blast sent both brothers sprawling to the ground. Dazed, Robert tried to get his bearings, but his vision blurred, and his ears rang from the concussive force. When he looked up, he saw Marcus lying a few feet away, unconscious but breathing. Before he could reach him, more guards emerged from the smoke, weapons drawn. Robert knew they were out of options. "Well played," he muttered, raising his hands in surrender. Krasnov's men closed in, binding their hands and dragging them toward a waiting vehicle. Robert's mind raced. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. They had planned for contingencies, but nothing had prepared them for being taken alive. As they were thrown into the back of an armored van, Robert locked eyes with Krasnov, who stood watching from a distance. There was no smug grin on his face now, only cold satisfaction. This was more than just a mission for Krasnov. This was personal. Captured hours passed as the van rumbled through unmarked roads, its destination unknown. Robert used the time to recover from the blast, his sharp mind already formulating possible escape scenarios. Marcus eventually stirred, groaning as he sat up. "Where are we?" Marcus asked, rubbing his head. "Somewhere far from where we want to be," Robert replied, keeping his voice low. "We need to figure out a way out of this." Before Marcus could respond, the van came to a sudden halt. The doors opened, revealing a remote facility surrounded by dense forest. The brothers were dragged out and escorted into a concrete building where they were thrown into separate cells. For the first time in years, the Langley brothers found themselves truly cornered. The offer. Several hours later, Robert was brought into an interrogation room where Krasnov awaited him. The room was bare, save for a single table and 2 chairs. Krasnov gestured for Robert to sit. "I could have killed you back at the compound," Krasnov began, lighting a cigar. "But that would have been a waste. You and your brother are valuable." Robert didn't respond. He knew better than to speak first in such situations. "I'm offering you a deal," Krasnov continued. "Work for me. Use your skills to eliminate my enemies, and in return, I'll let your family live." Robert's expression didn't change, but inside, his mind was racing. This was an unexpected twist. Krasnov wasn't interested in revenge. He wanted to control the Langley legacy. "And if I refuse?" Robert asked calmly. "Then you and your brother die, and I find another way to destroy your family," Krasnov said, his tone devoid of emotion. Robert leaned back in his chair, feigning contemplation. He needed time. Time to figure out a way to escape and rescue Marcus. But playing along might buy them that time. "Fine," Robert said at last. "But I have one condition. I won't work alone. My brother comes with me." Krasnov studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed. You'll start tomorrow." A desperate plan. Back in his cell, Robert quickly relayed the situation to Marcus through a hidden code they had developed as children. Each tap on the cell wall carried a message, and Marcus responded in kind. "We're not working for him," Marcus tapped back. "We escape or die trying." "Agreed," Robert tapped. "Be ready." The brothers knew they had only one chance. They would need to exploit Krasnov's arrogance and overconfidence, turning his trap against him. It wouldn't be easy, but if anyone could pull it off, it was the Langley brothers. Morning came quickly in the remote facility. The air was cold and the atmosphere tense. Guards patrolled the corridors with military precision, while security cameras watched every corner. Krasnov had built himself a fortress of steel and concrete, confident that no one could escape his grasp. But the Langley brothers were not ordinary prisoners. Robert had spent the night carefully observing the guards' routines, noting every detail, their patrol schedules, blind spots in the camera coverage, and the placement of key security systems. His photographic memory, honed through years of training, allowed him to create a mental map of the facility. Marcus, meanwhile, worked on securing a weapon. During their brief transfer to the training area that morning, he had managed to palm a small metal shard hidden in his boot. It wasn't much, but in Marcus's hands, even the smallest object could become deadly. The escape begins. Later that afternoon, Krasnov summoned the brothers to the main hall. The room was filled with armed guards, their eyes trained on Robert and Marcus as they entered. Krasnov stood at the far end, flanked by his top lieutenants. "Your first assignment," Krasnov said, tossing a folder onto the table in front of them. "An arms dealer in Eastern Europe. He's a rival who's been encroaching on my territory. You will eliminate him." Robert picked up the folder, pretending to study its contents. In reality, his mind was racing. He had already spotted a potential opportunity. The guards were focused on them, but the exits were partially unguarded. If they acted quickly, they could create a diversion and escape. Marcus gave a barely perceptible nod, signaling that he was ready. "Very well," Robert said, setting the folder down. "But we'll need access to better weapons." Krasnov smiled coldly. "Of course. Take them to the armory." As the guards led them away, Robert whispered to Marcus, "This is our chance." The breakout. In the armory, the brothers were handed an array of weapons. Robert selected a silenced pistol and a combat knife, while Marcus grabbed a high-powered rifle. Once the guards turned their backs, Marcus acted swiftly, using the metal shard he had hidden to disable the nearest guard with a quick jab to the neck. Robert moved in tandem, silently taking down 2 more guards before they could react. Within seconds, the brothers had neutralized the entire squad. "We need to move fast," Robert said, grabbing extra ammunition. They made their way through the facility, using their knowledge of the layout to avoid detection. Alarms soon blared, and Krasnov's men mobilized, but the Langley brothers stayed one step ahead. A final confrontation. As they reached the outer perimeter, they found themselves cornered by Krasnov and a dozen heavily armed guards. The exit was within sight, but the odds were against them. "You should have taken my offer," Krasnov said, aiming a pistol at Robert. "Now, you die." Robert remained calm, his mind working furiously. He noticed a fuel tank nearby. If they could trigger an explosion, it might give them the cover they needed to escape. Marcus caught his brother's gaze and understood instantly. Without hesitation, he raised his rifle and fired a single shot at the fuel tank. The explosion was deafening, sending flames and debris into the air. In the ensuing chaos, the brothers sprinted toward the exit. Bullets flew around them, but their training allowed them to dodge and weave through the gunfire. They reached the edge of the compound and disappeared into the dense forest beyond. Aftermath. Several hours later, the brothers emerged from the forest, exhausted but alive. They had managed to evade Krasnov's men, but they knew the fight wasn't over. Krasnov would come after them with everything he had. Back at a safe house miles away, William Langley waited anxiously. When his sons finally arrived, relief washed over his face. "You did well," William said, embracing them. "But Krasnov won't stop." Robert nodded. "We'll be ready." Marcus grinned. "Next time, we're bringing the fight to him." Together, the Langley family began preparing for the inevitable confrontation. This time, it wouldn't just be a mission, it would be a war. Epilogue: A new legacy. Months later, rumors began to spread in the underworld. Krasnov's empire had crumbled, his operations dismantled piece by piece. No one knew exactly who was behind it, but whispers pointed to the Langley family. The Langley brothers had not only survived, they had triumphed. Their legacy, forged in blood and shadow, continued to grow. But they knew that peace was fleeting, and the shadows would always call them back. For now, though, they allowed themselves a brief moment of rest. Together, as a family, they stood ready for whatever came next. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories like this, hit that like button and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And let me know on which topic you would like to see stories next. And check out these other stories you might enjoy. See you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.